go. Okay,
We can hear you.
perfect. Thank you. All right, so we're on the recording for roll call. I'll just do that in the absence of Jake, who's committee chair. I don't have vice chairs, and this is my committee staff rep. So I'm Clinton Shan, town manager.
Leo Kenny.
Sarah Marks, town council.
So the first thing on the agenda is the monthly financials. And Zach is unable to attend today, last minute, so I would prefer us delay as we're learning how to go through these. I want him to be there and a part of it. Do you mind if we bump him a month?
Sure.
Sure. We do have a lot on this agenda that we can go over anyway, so. So then the other one, the next one was gonna be my discussion of revenue sharing, but Jacob did reach out to me. And I think if you don't mind, we could go to the ones that are referred to committee, because there was 2 questions related to this that would be appropriate. One, we have heard back from KCI on the old fire station disposition, and they're still doing some review on their end, and it's gonna take some more time. I received this morning all the paperwork on the lease from our attorneys for review, so we haven't any time to put any of that forward. So I think what I'd like to do is if you're good with that, get that off to Jacob. Obviously, we're fine to continue to wait. We just got some of our documents. We want to share those with them anyway.
Lease.
Transfer, sorry, sale. I got a leasing issue coming up with the next one. So that's already, the next one's about a
Can you
lease.
back up a second? I missed the beginning, that's just on me. You said the KCI met, which is
Yeah.
the Katahdin Area Council, and they said what?
They're reviewing some of their trusts to figure out their opportunities for repairs.
Okay.
They proposed a plan where they'd like to do the foundation in advance. And upon satisfactory completion, that would be the ability to complete the transfer. So I think, Jacob, there's some more conversation to happen, but as long as this committee was okay, in fact, I could even read to you, if you would like, the exact email that was sent to both of us. Because it was, and he said share if you'd like. Probably the easiest way. So. Oh, that's not it. That's the one from CNN. There we go. Jacob, an update. Okay, so all right, make sure I got the right. So Brian had spoken to Glenn, who's one of the other gentlemen working with the KCI. They are working with a couple funds and trusts that are held by KCI. But there's another agency, the KAC, and I do not know the inner workings of KAC and KCI.
The area council is.
And then KCI is the land holding version of that, I think.
Okay.
So they're working through those. But these are good funds that could handle the ongoing operation and some renovations. They're trying to clarify who holds them and who can appropriate them and agree to their use. So they're working within their team to do that, and they've contacted attorneys, banks, etc. So they'd like to put an MOU that lines out that we would proceed, they could proceed with repairs. The town would then, subject to public hearing, transfer the deed to KCI if they would agree to take ownership after having done the repairs. They're working on those quotes to see what they are. They want to share those with us as well. And then after they building is held by the nonprofit, they could proceed with some maybe major fundraising, any loans they may or may not need, depending on how their funding comes together for the work, and then move to a second phase of upgrades to the property. So I think we're moving forward well on our deeds stuff. They're doing good work on their end. It's just taking a little bit more time.
Sure.
So
Was there any language proposed for like how they're going to, how we are going to incorporate like what gets maintained or something like that?
I got it today. I haven't even read it.
From the
Came in,
hardware.
yeah, and I just, you haven't even looked, but that, I worked with Jacob and we kicked back to them that we didn't want to go the main historic preservation easement route. We wanted it ourselves, and we wanted language that would refer to us. If they're unable to maintain or they wanted to sell, and that they would also maintain consistent with their approval, the aesthetics and what we're, the last thing I asked her is I said, can you review what would be interior versus exterior requirements? And she kicked back that today with me, and I gotta look and see if she had any other questions or not. I just and a lot of other stuff.
Now I'm sure, which is our lawyer who's working on this?
So we've used our local lawyer, and it is, she used to be counselor.
Cindy
Oh, Cindy
Maynard.
Maynard. Okay.
Just on your video there.
There you go, yeah, okay,
She used to be town council.
great, okay.
So, thank you.
So Cindy's working on it, and the information you were saying about the foundation work is KCI.
Yeah, they wanna
proposing to
get-
Pay for the foundation
they
work
wanna
and
get
do
that-
that themselves, even when they don't own the building yet.
They want to get on that quickly.
Okay.
And I think that's how they're working an MOU that says, can we have permission to do that while we're working through the other phases?
Got it.
So, yeah, I think there's gonna be a meeting between Jacob and I and them after, at some point here in the future, but right now, we're both kind of almost ready, I think, to proceed.
Progress,
Okay?
thanks.
The other one, so this gets into the other agenda item, which is the council approval for the limits to spending it. So we've been working with this and we've been going back and forth. And there's all these unique questions, hypotheticals in the real world that vary from what's going on. And we're having a hard time writing policies. And Jacob and I haven't just really circled back fully, but a new one's popped up. So we have some leases for copiers. And we have one that is, we go from lease to own and then we migrate. So there's kind of a laddering system. So they went out and Shelley was spearheading a little bit of a process because the one at the public works garage is not functioning and beyond repair. They can't, it's just, there's no parts and it's, I believe, I don't want to get quoted, but it was approaching 10 years old. And for a copier that gets the use that we put through some of these, that's getting up there at the copier lines. So they were just looking at different options. She came forward with a proposal and it caught me and I'm like, okay, yeah, $2,700 a year is only $900 more than what we currently pay. And it's something we have to do, and what we would do is migrate and rotate through.
All of them?
Pretty much, and so I gotta meet with her and get the whole thing, yeah, that's everything, that's the
What does
point.
migrate mean? So lease
Migrate.
own, what is migrate?
Migrate means
You
we take
move
one of the
them
ones
from-
that we now own,
Uh-huh.
and we give it to one of the other departments that uses it a lot less.
Got it.
And we move the newest one in, so kind of what you're looking at is this one. I don't know this perfectly, but would move downstairs, the one downstairs moves out to Public Works. And then a new one slides in here, and then we're gonna buy one, and that's on budget, we don't have to get permission, that's into the threshold. We're gonna buy a small one for out here, because we're really changing, we don't want this in here anymore, we wanna turn this more into a meeting room, and get rid of the big copier for smaller ones, so. All things said, on an annual basis, easily well within my discretion.
Yeah.
But it's a 5-year lease purchase.
Right.
So you put 2,700 times 5, it goes over it. So I'm like, this is perfect. What do I do? So I'm kind of like, well, this is why we got a finance committee. How would you propose we handle these? Is this consent calendar? Because it's kind of questionable and I'm using my discretion to say, I don't want to be on it unilaterally and be questioned later
Sure.
for why I made that change, or is this a finance committee presentation and you guys just document you did it and you kick it along and say, yeah, we approved it? I don't know,
I mean, I think the
kind
current,
of uncharted here.
I haven't looked back at them recently because we haven't cycled to this as a finance committee yet, but the current internal controls manual says that council has to approve it if it's over 7,500, correct? So I guess I would say it's not a finance committee approval. I do think it could go on a consent agenda, something like this. If, you know, you just had a short little memo there saying,
Yeah.
here's the details. I don't think council needs to have a big discussion about this.
No.
But
I
I
don't
would say
either. I
consent
just-
agenda. to
It's
think
just
we
in
have-
that black hole of where we're learning what people are
In
coming
this
with.
budget of where, is office supply, I mean.
That one would
we
be in
don't
the
go-
town office budget for
No,
administrative
it's budget
costs.
that's there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's nothing, yeah, that's consensus.
Right, and I do think this cycles back to why this got flagged, though, as something to take a look at in the internal controls manual, you know, as.
And I think we're
committee
coming to
take a
the
look
bigger
at.
solution, because like one of the ones, it's the larger contracts is where you gotta really focus.
Yeah.
And like I said, is I'd like to spend some time itemizing all large agreements, contracts, et cetera. Put them out in front of us. I don't even know the last time someone went out. But whether it's an RFQ, RFP, you name it, RFQ with RFP materials in a sealed envelope, you got different ways to do it. Or a combination, but a lot of times what you're doing is like some of the bigger ones are organizations that have an hourly rate schedule with us. So that would be the big component. What are your hourly rates? But even when we have those, we tend to use that as the gateway in that we've gone through a competitive process. When future projects come out, we don't bid them every time.
Mhm.
But again, this council could say, it's a changing environment, we'd like to bid them every time. I gotta get that with Jacob back to you guys for feedback to get to the council for decisions, so. We can work on those, but I think this is kind of one I want to talk about, the things we referred to committee. I think we're on a good plan, it's just taking more time.
Yeah, it seems like there's a series of different questions, like the first thing that was referred to us is really the $7,500 limit.
Yep.
But as we look at that, you're saying that staff might have recommendations around how often we're bidding out contracts and if that's connected and whether we need to take a look at that. And I also think we mentioned it in one of our early discussions, I think, about the $7,500 limit, that we can either have what we have now, which is a flat dollar limit, or we can have something which says, if it's, I mean, it's already for money that's in the budget and already approved. But we could have something that says if it's in the budget and already approved, unless it's more than
40.
15%, well, not even a number, it could be unless it's more than 15% of a departmental budget or 5% of a departmental budget or some figure. It doesn't, I mean, it could be a flat figure, or it could be, look, we only need to get involved when it's beyond a certain percent of a departmental budget, right?
This isn't a unique problem, every town
Yeah.
tends to struggle with this unless they're so big that they end up having
Right.
a control, a comptroller or a purchasing agent or something along those lines that can really pay attention to those and work those through on a daily basis. This is just kind of where we work it. This lease came up and staff brought to me and I said, that's over our spending limit if you look at it from the life of the lease.
And that is how you probably you're supposed to look at it, right? Because we wouldn't necessarily, if it's open, and again, I don't know how you cover that, like, yeah, we've got it, it's 10 grand a year for 10 years, it's $100,000.
But there is money in the operating budget for copier costs, so you
Yeah.
can argue it's a budgeted item, but we really
Yeah.
haven't ironed out
Yeah.
what a budgeted item is yet.
Right.
Just because we budgeted to do
Yeah.
a Route 2 project or something like that, doesn't mean we've approved, well, perfect one, the library was moving forward
Yeah.
with a approved quote unquote budget. But again, that didn't say that we'd hired a contracting firm, so when we hired a firm to do the design work,
Yeah.
we came back, when we ultimately award the bid to do construction, that
Yeah.
will come back. Even though there's a budget in the budget book that says, yes, you could start moving forward on the library. So,
Yeah, I do
okay.
like the idea of having something that's in policy, or the internal controls manual, or, something about how many years a contract can be renewed before it does have to come back to council for some discussion, I think would be smart.
Yep.
I mean, I don't think it should be indefinitely that they can keep getting renewed without there being a cycle back.
That's kind of, and I said the same to Jacob, so let's just get them on the list. And we'll say, here's, we want to do it every 6, 5, 3, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then we
Yeah.
say, these ones are the first, second, third, we try to break them up the workload. Some of them are big, you are supposed to bid insurance every so often. There's some rules on going out for proposals for auditors. Again, best practice, not necessarily law. So we should look at those, but yeah, we'll put those together.
I do think that what you brought up as a question to us in terms of, this recommendation came to this committee kind of because Shelley and other folks on staff bringing to kneecap and talking about, are there things that are taking up council time that maybe don't always need to? So I do think the consent agenda is the right place to put this with an attachment with a short description from you, but that way we don't take up council time having it be a separate action item unless we need to. And if a councilor looks at it, they can always ask to pull it off the consent
Right.
agenda, as can anyone else in the public.
Exactly.
So it doesn't prevent that, but it allows the efficient flow of meetings when it isn't something that needs to be talked about. Does that make sense, Leo?
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. Well, if we're good, that takes care of discussion of referred to committee and financial boards postponed. So I'm on to revenue sharing. You guys want to talk revenue sharing?
Sure, that's always so fun.
So I sent out, do you want I didn't print hard copies for everybody of the memo I had shared out.
I think I printed it.
Do you want one?
You had scenarios
It's the
you're gonna
revenue
show us
sharing
on the
demo.
screen, right?
I'm gonna bring the spreadsheet up. I didn't want to have to go
Yeah,
back and forth.
no, it's okay, Leo, I can, if you don't have it on your screen, we can scoot down and share too. It's fine. This is the
So
memo
I'm
we
just-
sent
And I'm
us.
gonna talk, I can bring it up while I talk about it here.
When did you send it?
Oh, a few weeks ago. Was the one there was some communications back and
Response to
forth.
mine.
Yes,
Which is why I didn't get it. The way it all
Me
changed
too.
everything together. Yeah,
me too.
it is the hardest
So-
searchable.
Well, I mean, and again, for the people that are watching,
Feel free.
this is going in the budget books. This was the beginning of
Yeah,
what I
this
was
is
doing
great.
for budget books. You guys got asking questions at the last meeting,
Yeah, this is
which I
great.
think is timely. The revenue sharing's not simple. It can be understood, but it's not something you just pick up a book, pick up an email, and say, oh, that's what it's about. I mean, if you wanna get the quick version, the state of Maine takes money out of sales tax, puts it aside and give back to towns for revenue share. That's why Maine doesn't have a local option sales tax, is because they do it through revenue share. It goes high, it goes low. Right now, and it was just reapproved yesterday, over the weekend for the biennial budget. It is set at 5% again for this year. Again, the last check is they still haven't looked at the year-end revenues that they brought in, so we don't know 5% of what. So the next thing to hear is how much is the what.
Yeah.
So the 5% that we're getting, they have done it for the year that we've seen on the preliminaries, it's based on projections, but they will finalize those numbers. That's why typically you see 2 or 3 reiterations of this is how much revenue sharing you're getting for the year. So, the key statistics I always try to share with everybody is the state valuation, which is done by the state tax assessor's office. We can talk about that. The tax assessment provided by the property tax division of the Maine Revenue Services. And then the population of your town is important, or community, I should say. And there's 488 communities that make this up. So the easy one, quote unquote, is Rev 1. That was always the case, and it was just a formula that took your population, multiplied it by your assessment, divided by the valuation of the state. It came up with a commuted number, which is basically your percent share, and put all the commuted numbers together and gave the total amount and just divvied it up amongst all the towns. And what they realized is that that was being unfair to certain communities. I will not say if it's small, medium, or large, because there is no rhyme or reason to which ones get more or less of it. But what it is based upon is that communities that have very low values in a proportionate ratio to the number of people that live there. So if you have a low state value and a very high population, your Rev 2 money will go higher. And what they do is they pull out a piece, I believe it's 25%, but don't quote me, of all that revenue is put into Rev 2. It's 20. Okay.
For clarification though, so population times assessment, what's assessment?
The state stack, the population times the state's calculated property tax assessment. So for Orono, it's
Valuation?
Yep.
Yeah, it's funds valuation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Valuation.
Our
Yeah.
assessment and our valuation. The total assessment of the whole town is our valuation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Each person's individual assessments get totaled up and create the valuations.
Okay.
Similar
So
to-
Well,
population
no,
time.
evaluation's on the, it's
Oh,
down here on the
so valuation.
denominator.
So what
So
is assessment?
assessment is what we assess people in taxes. So this is how much we bill
Yeah.
out in taxes every year.
The actual, not the mill rate, but the
No,
actual.
the actual number
revenue
of
that we
dollars
collect.
that we bill and we
Yeah.
should therefore collect. So
Yeah.
it's the amount that we're taxing.
Mm.
So this is, assessment is taxes and state valuation is property value.
Correct.
Does that help?
Yep.
Yeah.
So it gets the, and again, I'm gonna bring up at this point, I think it's time to share this screen. So this is what's given by the state of Maine. I've gone on to page 2, which is a little unique. So you guys are in this meeting, right?
So interestingly, for fiscal year 25, the state's formula used 2022 tax assessment.
Yep, because they're always a year behind.
No, they're 3 years behind.
Yeah, almost 3.
For
Yep.
some things.
Well, you gotta
You're
remember.
still kind of.
So what happens is that, you remember, we got every town, 488 of us. Some of us operate on different fiscal years, but all of us are focused on April 1st. That's when you draw the line. But some of us have to get it done really quick, like Orono, because we want to send our tax bills out in June.
Mhm.
Then you have communities that send their tax bills out in the following June. So their assessments are set on April 1, but they're so far behind on budget years, tax years, they might have a 12/30 year end, they might have a March 31st year end. So those bills can come out quite a bit later. And when those bills come out, so what happens is there's almost a year that all the towns are getting the information of the state, then the state gets it. They take about a year refining it, and then the following year it sets your value, what they're gonna use for state tax revenue sharing purposes. So they're behind.
For the sake of 2026, we've got, they use 2023 census, they use 2023 assessment, the valuation is 2025.
Yes.
Which that's already in the books.
Because we told them,
Yeah.
yep, we have it. We gave them
Oh,
our
okay.
2025 assessment.
Valuation.
Yeah,
Which one was
valuation.
that? Yes, 2025 valuation, we had given them.
Okay.
Yep, and that's their valuation of us. So like, this is one Sarah's kind of talked about. Why doesn't it match what we said our total town value was? This is where they calculate out things that aren't included. TIF districts. It's not the entire land in a TIF district, but property values in a TIF district are held out of this calculation.
Right.
As they are like
That's our
school
advantage of
subsidies.
using TIF.
And there's a lot of advantages to the town for
Yeah.
doing this. There's, and again, and that gets you into a very difficult calculation, but there's a lot more that can go in behind it. So that gets us into, so there's the beginnings of Rev 2. So, and then I kind of jump into what you guys have started last year with the rep with, what is 100,000? If you had a mill rate of 20, you gotta understand is if our mill rate's 20. And this is what I'm working on with you is that your mill rate's a ratio.
Yeah.
It's your total amount you're spending compared to the total value of your town. It results in a ratio. We call it the mill rate. That mill rate is then set for the entire town based upon what we're totally gonna spend, what we're totally worth. Then we take all the little pieces of your houses, your businesses, whatever it is you have, your business equipment, and we multiply our mill rate by each of those little things that we've set through the assessing department, and that's your fair share of the total. So when you add them all up, they equal.
Sure.
But again, mill rate, everybody says, well, let's just make the mill rate lower. In order to make the mill rate lower, you either have to reduce your spending or increase your value. It's all on that ratio thing. So we're, and
Well, and ultimately, what I liked about this page that you created for us is I think it does a really good job of highlighting why, although the mill rate is important because we need to use it to calculate that everyone's share is fair and equally divided, it's not the best thing to track in terms of how people are being affected. Because for me as a property owner,
Mhm.
if the mill rate stays flat, but my house has just been reassessed and, the value of my house has gone up 50,000, I'm paying more taxes even if the mill rate stays flat, right? So in the end, what
Right.
homeowners care about is how much am I likely to be billed,
Yeah.
not so much what the mill rate
So when
is.
you're,
Yeah,
so then if a taxpayer comes and says, oh, the mill rate's flat, my taxes should be fine.
Right,
Whoa,
that's
whoa,
not how it
that's not
works.
necessarily
Yeah.
true. Did you add value last year?
Right, but so, and I'm a little unclear on this because we do get a new number from the state every year, and maybe it's, because they're catching they're catching the actual new value. The state or we don't just apply a 0.3% to every property in town. We just did a big reeval that made a huge impact on a lot of people. But now, how often does that number get changed? If you do nothing, pull no permits, don't do anything.
So no,
that
last
doesn't
year-
just get changed.
It does,
It does.
because
So
we
you
have to
have home
maintain a
value.
certified ratio, which is a whole other
I
conversation.
know, and you talked a little bit about.
Well, that's,
that,
so we gotta be
but-
careful, but so last year, so what we're seeing is that you revalued in COVID
Mhm.
and everything changed. So you set a new good value for the town of Orono, and then all of a sudden, the market went all over. Houses are up, businesses were closing, so you had to lower them. Everything got into chaos, and we're now coming out of that chaos. And in Orono's situation, we've come out the other side, and ours, and I gotta double check it, I'm pretty sure it's a certified ratio is what they call it, we're low. So what can happen, and it's not normal, but it can happen, is that if we fall too far, the state of Maine will call us up and say, you're too far out of whack, so what we're gonna do is tell you, you're losing a percentage of your homestead reimbursement. So if you lose a percentage of homestead reimbursement, it means we're better off correcting values so that people can still keep their homestead value. And then that becomes another math game. So right now, last year, you were risking losing it, an adjustment was made, and there was a recommendation from the assessor to do that for 2 years. We're debating whether we should do the second year or not, and we gotta have a conversation with council, but we haven't hit April 1st yet. He's not ready to give me all the information I need to know what he's reviewing. But we may want to see another, and what they call it is, and you don't do it, you can do it in every area, you can do it in some areas. But a lot of times what you do is just say, you know what, we've noticed that we're falling off in our value, but it's not everywhere. It's all our commercial land only. It's commercial land is selling so much more. So we got up the land values, or in a farming community, say, our agricultural land's being bought up like crazy. We've got 100 acres over here that we said is worth 100,000. And some company just bought it for 3.6 million. And so that's why you start looking at your sales analysis. And the assessor tries to compute what's fair. Assessing's not easy, and it is far from an exact science. It's a science, and it's a lot of work, but it's far from exact. So this is where you get into that whole other conversation about what to do. We may go up to 10% this year.
You said we just went, you said we changed, we did because of that, and I remember you talking
Yeah,
about it.
last year, you guys,
After the reappraisal, after the assessment,
Yeah.
after the,
The big one
Rebound.
was in
The
two
big one.
thousand and,
okay.
the big one affected us in 2000.
2019, 20.
So if,
Well, there was one for, anyway, keep going. There was
so
something
if
between
I've got,
24,
if
25.
I've got a house for 200,000 after the reeval, that's what
Yeah.
it was. And then 2 years later, we just had an adjustment, what did it adjust, 10%?
10%.
So now I've got now my house is 220. If
If
it
you had a
applied,
200,000, it was down to 20, correct?
and that actually happened,
That actually happened.
huh?
Did it
And
happen
that's,
across
and
the
again,
board?
So
so
in
this is, I
theory-
can show you, you know how you should have known?
Yeah.
Is there's a beacon.
Yeah.
I call it a beacon, it's your mill rate.
Yeah.
Your mill rate was 23,
And then
we
it
dropped
went
to
down.
21.
Right.
That was the
That's why.
That's what
10%.
should happen,
Right,
obviously.
And that's
So
what-
in theory, it shouldn't matter to someone unless you're just, you know, like you said, oh, it's farmland and there are 5 farmland properties. And that's where it is, so that's where they get nailed and then it wouldn't all be equal.
And that's where you can get 5 angry farmers coming into you and saying, what'd you do? So this is where we're looking at, we have some pockets, the
Yeah.
council's aware, we've had some areas where people have challenged us, we gotta look at the challenges.
Yeah.
Because that's what your sign is on the assessing side, if people are coming and saying something's wrong,
Mhm.
that's your sign to say, well, if they're saying, what, you know, are asking for an abatement, why are they asking for abatements? Why is there 15 filed abatements on this one type of property class? And then they go through and in some situations, you bring in an outside person, sometimes he just goes and looks at it himself and determines what's fair. But you remember, most people ask for abatement, they're not asking for a higher value.
Yeah.
And this is the other one I always said, you know, usually when you do a reval, you hear from a lot of angry people. You also don't hear from a ton of people. Typical valuations is you can be guaranteed is a third go up, a third don't change, and a third go down. The third that went up are coming in angry. The third that went down are sitting at home saying, don't say anything.
And yeah, and there's no question.
Yeah.
Based on looking at the numbers, the higher value properties either didn't change or stayed. I looked at it and then the lower ones got dumped.
Hey, I'm still in year 1. Give me time.
Yeah,
You
no.
get a better feel for it as
Yeah.
you go. But
Can I
that's-
ask a question about this also
Mhm.
on the reevaluations that we was talking about? And I guess the thing I want to be clear on, are there 2 different kinds of reevaluations? Are there the kind where we say
Mhm.
every so often we do an official one,
Mhm.
and which is sort of what happened in 2019, right?
Yeah.
And that's a very systemic look across everything by us because we're saying we need to do this every so often.
Yeah.
But then if I'm hearing you right, there's a different kind which may happen, which is in response to the state telling us we may be out of
So
whack.
the first
and-
one,
Yeah,
townwide full value
right, thank you.
revaluation. Townwide full value, means
Yeah.
you're looking at everything going in big. What we do every year,
Yeah.
every community across the state, is they look at your valuations for equity.
Yeah.
We have to do sales reports to the state of Maine, we have to do comps, they actually have to go down and look at every property that's sold. We have to determine if it was an arm's length transaction. And we report this all to the state of the Maine that reviews all this data for us. That leads to our certified ratios. Are we doing our work and are we doing a good job of it? So, and again, you know, arm's length transaction, if you give a property or sell a property for $50 to your son,
That gets thrown out.
it gets thrown out in your comparison of what your sales
Sure.
ratios are.
Sure.
So there's a lot, like I said, there's a lot that goes in.
Yeah,
We've got, you know, multiple transactions, not getting into the weeds, but we had a property this year sell with 3 other parcels, not in the town. No assessments, no appraisals. We know the full sale price. Well, of 4 properties. What portion of that is ours? So we have, that one's probably gonna have to get tossed for being inaccurate sales data. So what do we do with the value of that property? Don't know. What happens is that assessor will probably go look to the communities in that, because the deed says where everyone is. We call that the assessors in all 3 of those communities and say, what did you have for values on those 3? This is what I had. This is what, okay, so we were 18% of that deal.
Yeah.
That deal looks like, that says we're up, we're down, we're left, we're right. They try to do some math on it, and it's tricky, but it's the best you can do with what's going on, so.
Clint, can I ask just one follow-up?
No, this is your time.
Understood on the, every year, there's this comparison that happens at the state level that leads to flagging if we're off on our certified ratio and we might choose to make an adjustment, which we did last year, apparently.
Mhm.
You mean, when you say last year, you mean between 24 and 25?
Yes.
That's the year I saw it in the data.
Yeah,
Okay, the other kind
and I
is,
don't know what the, and again, in hindsight, but typically in those moments, there'd be a presentation from staff on what we're doing and why.
I don't know, but this other kind, this townwide full value review across everything, is there a policy about how often we do that as a town? Do towns have such policies? Do towns just,
state requirement.
It is.
But, yeah, but does the state, I think each town does this quite differently, like the state mandates a minimum amount of how often you have to do
Yep.
it, and some towns choose to do it at the minimum level, and others choose to do it much more often, maybe in an effort to spread out the pain, I don't know.
The
But
state
also probably
rarely.
costs more to
yeah,
do it
so
more than,
the-
right,
The
so,
full value ones can be pricey. They
Right.
come down
Yeah.
because it's become cheaper to do them with the advent of GIS systems.
Sure.
I mean, they can measure the
Yeah.
sidelines of your
Yeah.
house from online to the inch. Whereas it used to be, they actually and I did them for a stretch, and you go to the house.
Yeah.
And you grab a measure, and you walk around the outside, you measure every single parcel. You write it down a sheet, and all these maps. So now it's gotten a lot easier, they're cheaper. Some towns go 40 years, and they say,
Right.
no, 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 and as long as and they keep working with their
Adjusting.
sales and certified
Right.
ratios,
Mhm.
and they say, we're accurate, we're accurate.
Do you know how
I'm
often?
a different philosopher on this one. I think that full value, but should happen when you see major problems. You should maybe think about it. Orono's challenging me in my philosophy because you did it, and then COVID hit. So I'm like, how do we deal with the COVID world? And we've got a really good assessor in a contracted assessor, and he's making these recommendations, and he knows this year he's gonna look into it a lot further. And I said, I need to understand where we should or shouldn't be, because what we're about to talk about.
Yeah,
We got
it's
10
connected.
minutes,
Okay,
but
can
when
I just,
it goes different ways, and I wanna do our high posts.
so, yeah, can I just have one tiny thing, how often have we done them in order? These
I would have to
townwide
look
full
back.
values, we know
I'd
we
have
did
to
one
look
in
back.
2019,
I'd
we
have to
don't
look
know,
back.
okay.
I
In the
don't know.
future, I'm just curious.
There is a database on the state of Maine where they maintain the last time it was done, so.
Thanks.
Um,
Yeah.
So,
Thanks.
so Rev 2 is where we're gonna focus in, so this is the spreadsheet,
Up on the wall.
and if you look up here, here's Orono, right here, I'm gonna highlight our column, that's Orono.
Yeah.
So this tells us our population, July 23, our tax assessment for 23, our valuation for 25 was 736 million.
Yeah.
Our computed number, which is what they determine what our share is. And then it goes across, it gives you your computed number mill rate, Rev 2 preliminary, corrected Rev 2, and then your final. So as you go across, you end up way over here. That Rev 2 for this year is projected to be 2,591,000.
Yep.
So I want you to remember that number. So let's say that the state comes out next year. And
What
we're
was
gonna
it
do the,
again? I already don't remember. 2,591,000,
Yeah.
right?
yeah, 2,591,000.
Okay.
So now so
There
we
we
get, somebody comes in and says, you know what, they grew. So our population's down 12.5.
Yeah,
That's the only thing that changes. Everything else changes.
Yep.
What happens to Orono? We get 2,695,000 at Rev 2.
Right.
It goes up almost 100,000.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna undo that so I don't lose that data. But 1199, yeah, it was actually over $100,000 increase.
right.
Say,
So
And
this
all
is
we
the
did is
thing.
we grew by 501 people.
So Leo, it goes back to this formula, and it kind of goes back to the basic thing, like when things in the numerator go up,
Yeah.
our number's gonna get bigger, and when things in the denominator go up, our number's gonna get smaller. So population's up in the numerator, so we get more money when our population grows.
So
That's what
here's
we're
a tricky
doing.
one. So let's go to our neighbor Old Town that receives 270,000 of Rev 2.
Mhm.
And let's move their population up by 500. This 27494 to 7994.
Mhm.
Oops.
So you got a 1.9, you just shrunk it a
799.
lot.
It's so de minimis to us, we see no change in our state valuations.
right.
It just doesn't
Yeah,
affect
'cause
us.
it's
But
the
if
whole
everybody
forward
else- but if-
towns or
If
whatever.
everybody else grew and we didn't, and everyone grew, that might affect us. right?
Correct.
Yeah,
But
So, and again, it's comparison. So then, it can be tricky.
Clint,
So, yeah.
that's a July 1, 2023.
Mhm.
That's not gonna change in this form, in this sheet.
no, he's just trying to show
Correct.
us
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
at a different
Yeah.
year it happened.
Yeah.
In a different
Yeah.
year, it's not
Okay,
gonna change.
all right,
Yeah.
gotcha.
But I'm
I
saying,
just-
so
just-
you
It's a
know,
really good
looking into
question,
future years, to kind of show you the math of how things happen, so like even, so the next one is, so say say we spent more. So we have a tax assessment for Orono of 13,281. Right?
Yeah, say you spend another.
Yeah, so let's just,
500,000.
yeah, so let's, actually, I'm gonna call it 14, let's just go to 14,
Okay.
14, so that's an easier one to remember what I changed. $1,000,000. 500,000. Over 500,000 more.
Everyone's not happy with us already, so here we go.
But you're saying Yeah.
This is
Spend,
different
I
year.
mean, spend more,
Sure.
get more
Right.
is
Well,
what.
maybe
But
not,
again,
actually,
careful
you'll
though,
see
so
it.
what's gonna happen is if
It's
we
not
spend
going to.
more,
Yeah.
everybody's mill rate's gonna go up, they're gonna get higher tax bills.
Right.
But we get more revenue sharing, so we would never want to do this.
Yeah.
But you're rewarded for doing it in
You are
revenue sharing.
rewarded, we wouldn't want to do it. Right.
Correct.
But what actually happens when you do it? Just out of curiosity, what happens to the rev share number when it changes? We
Went
can't
up
see
by
it.
$500,000.
We can't see just on our screen, just so you know, you can see, but you have to scroll us
Oh,
over.
did it?
It's not
Sorry.
fully showing
I'll
for
go
us.
back, boom,
So,
there it is, we're gonna go over it, you're at 3 million,
uh, and
And
we
I
were
gotta-
at what before?
2,591,000.
What did
Oh,
it
yeah.
do, what did it do anything to the Rev one?
It doesn't, because Rev one's fixed and locked, it never
Yeah.
changes,
It
no
is.
matter what you do, that's not gonna change.
Oh,
And you can't play with Rev one, because they don't give you access to play with the formulas. It's built in statically on an external document, I'd have to contact them, but they do, that's on a very fixed.
Well,
formula.
Rev one does change.
It
It-
does, but they calculate it for the year.
Yeah.
And once it's done, there's no
Sure.
variable to it. This one, for some reason, they give us access to see how the variables.
Right, so we can play with it, but it's
Yep.
not that Rev one doesn't move. Okay,
Right.
anyway, so if we did that, it would be a bad idea, but we
Yep.
would also get how much more money from the state?
$500,000.
Interesting.
Yeah, we would raise 2 million more in taxes, and we get $500,000 more in state money. So
But you
it-
went from 13 to 14, isn't that less than less than?
it's a million.
it's $1 million.
You raised
It's
$1 million.
dollars. I
Raised
raised
$1
it-
million.
Oh, sorry, $1 million,
Yeah.
sorry. I said
Yeah, you
2
said
million.
2. I'm like,
No,
wait, didn't
I
you?
raised
Yeah.
$1 million
We don't
more.
want to raise people's
And we got
taxes, just for
$500,000.
anyone listening, that's not what we're thinking
So
about.
I don't even know, I gotta double check this one, but I said we should show you guys this, so let's increase our state value by $100 million.
Right.
So we're gonna go to 836.
So we built a whole lot of new
Which
stuff
it
in town
did go up almost $100 million from
Yep.
from the
2024.
reeval.
So you go up $100 million
Mhm.
and we're gonna lose $700,000 of Rev two.
And we only went up how much in value on that?
I did 100 million, so
So
it
you
went
did-
from
you did
736 to 836.
Oh, you did 100 million value up, and we what, how much did we?
700. So what happens here is, this is where it's tricky.
Mhm.
It's disproportionate, the calculation, because it's a ratio.
Yeah.
So a huge increase like that looks like, oh, well, we only lost 7 million and we gained 100 million in taxable value. We get a ton of money on the other side. So let's go the other route. Let's just shrink that down to, where did I lost it? I had it where I wanted
Is
it.
there a way to show us the whole screen, so we can still see the things on the right, or can we not do that?
It gets so small for
Okay,
me, it's hard for
that's
me to
fine then.
see. I
We
don't
just have to scroll
know.
back and forth.
Yeah, I'm trying to, so I lost over, I did a page up, I lost over.
So that last one, we added $100,000 of value.
100
100
million.
million, sorry, I mean. we
Which
lost
is what it
700,000.
changes
Yeah,
in
it
a year
is.
roughly.
When we
So
had the reeval.
that was a $700,000 difference, so let's cut it by half.
Right, and this is Rev two money we're losing.
So we're gonna go to 786 instead of 736, so this is 50 million.
Mhm.
50 million, we go to 2.2. So we lost 300,000 instead of, we
Right.
we lose 300 instead of 700.
Yeah.
So you can see how
It's
there's
not
a,
exactly.
it's
yeah.
not a 1-for-1 as it goes up the
Yeah.
scale, because it continues to be a ratio, and that's where it's like, you know, and I shared with Sarah at one point here, is that a lot of times towns used to talk about, how can we guess what's gonna
Oh,
happen?
you can't.
You can't.
Yeah.
No.
You
So
can
I
have
think
a
it's good that
feel.
we understand, and
Yeah.
you understand, and Zach understands kind of everything about what is driving
Yeah.
this number. But also, I think that we all clearly understand that.
Yep.
When you get 400 other communities, everything's moving,
Yeah.
we're not changing
So-
Yeah.
that.
The
So
one
the
thing
last
that-
one I wanted to say here,
Oh.
just for the committee,
Yeah.
is that I share with one or two, we are the largest receiver of Rev two.
Yeah.
We have the
In the
largest,
state.
because we have the largest population
Compared
to
to.
compare to our value.
Yeah.
And that is a direct, and this is why, because one
Nice
of the
to-
goals of Rev two is to get money to communities that for some reason have severe restrictions.
Mhm.
Ours is a very clear, severe, we have a very large nonprofit sector
So,
that in theory could be taxable income. However,
Yeah.
you gotta remember, for your own conversation, we probably have 4,000 residents here. There's a lot of buildings in this town that are taxable because of them. There's businesses here. Again, example, Tyler has made it clear to us, they located here because of the proximity to university.
Sure.
That's a taxable entity.
Yeah.
You know, there's now a hotel that's taxable on the grounds of that
Yeah.
school. So there aren't, it's hard to say perfectly, but, and again, the bigger argument was back that Portland has a large number of nonprofits,
Mhm.
hotel, hospitals,
Mhm.
et cetera. So this is set up for those, for these towns, because service center communities
Yeah.
tend to have more challenges than the smaller ones. So this is, and you can see it in some of the other communities. Your real, and I hate this term, but a bedroom community, a heavily residential community that's built itself on being near a service center and just building all the residences and having great value, they don't get much rep too.
They don't get
Because-
any in some cases.
Because their value to population goes the other route.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's, I think, sort of in my view of EPS on the school funding, I think they did a really good job,
Mhm.
actually.
Yep.
And I think this is convoluted, but it's, you know, hearing all this, they've accounted for things, because we always, you know, we're always complaining, we got this massive,
But
you
actually,
know, imagine we're getting, what the taxes we're getting from just a hotel on there. If we were taxing all those buildings, we'd be large, living
Could be.
large. Now, but we're also, but
Luckily,
that's
they're making up
accounted
for some of
for in this, yeah, some of it.
So
right?
here's the
Yeah.
weird one, so like, no, we'll leave that, this is too much.
I think we should
information.
stop here,
Yeah, there's
because
too
I
much
know we're
information.
getting to your
And what I'd
time.
like to do though is Sarah's done some work, you've done some work, I've done some work. I'd like to pull this all together, because I think we're onto something that goes into the, well, the presentation actually goes into your budget
I
packets.
agree,
It goes out to the
I
community.
agree.
They, you know, giving explanation of this. We're not gonna solve our problems here today, but if we can build understanding, hopefully it creates transparency that people understand.
Right,
This town tries hard to figure out what's right.
They do,
And we do try. I've always tried. It's just, this is one of those ones that, for a small town, they wouldn't even begin to look at this.
Yeah.
this-
Sarah, the teacher, will put this into 4 bullets that everyone can.
I will
understand.
try my best.
She's promised me something to
I
that
can do it.
effect.
I can do it.
She's- yeah, that's-
I would say the one thing I do think we might want to just add to this conversation to come back to another time is that while we certainly can't ever figure out all the variables in this, there's no way to, I mean, you can't control how this formula works. The one thing I do think that we should talk about is that when we add value outside of a TIF district versus inside of a TIF district, Clint and I just began speaking about, but I think it is important for us to understand that if we do add value in business or homes outside of a TIF district,
Mhm.
it doesn't really help us because the cuts to our Rev 2 are so severe and businesses that it really helps us not at all. But when we add them
Or-
within the TIF, they make a really, they
Well,
still
the other,
matter.
but the other one, remember, is we're heavily at $5 million of received monies.
Yeah.
We're heavily dependent upon revenue sharing.
I understand.
We
can be
probably as a
independent.
community want to talk to be
Yeah.
less dependent
Sure
upon
thing.
revenue sharing.
Yeah.
Because the more that comes from your own tax base, the
Yeah.
less dependent you are.
But I don't think I would have to.
That's numbers
run
we
that-
should look at.
Run that
Yeah.
out a little bit, because I think if you put in 30 houses, you also have to take into account students at school bring us revenue.
Yeah,
So-
understood,
So,
understood.
but like big,
Right, but I think that
Okay.
picture we should talk about, because the thing we do have control over as a town is what we build and whether we build it inside TIF districts or not. And so that piece, I think we should cycle back to on this committee, not today because
Yeah.
it needs to end.
Well,
but
we
I
got,
think that's
let's do
important.
one thing though. We got a couple minutes. I want to show you one thing. You bring up a good
I don't
scenario.
know if there are TIF, I don't know if there are TIF districts, TIFs.
There are.
There are.
He and I have been talking a lot and
So
I
TIF
will leave you in.
Can you apply it to certain, like, couldn't you apply it?
So
like,
the
in lots of
money-
Places it doesn't necessarily.
Well, it goes to economic development. So for example, you guys are gonna see the capital plan, how we're gonna use that money.
But when you
Lower
say
property
district,
tax.
is it a spot on the map?
It is, yeah.
And that's
it's
the
actually
only
mapped.
place that we can put a TIF?
We can,
It's the only,
That's
it
the only
is
place
the
you can
TIF, it's
apply
the
it.
only
We can
place.
make a
it's the
different
only
TIF
place
for
you
each
apply the
district.
TIF. Yep.
and there's a
the only place.
maximum of our land that
Right.
can be in a TIF at any point in time.
Oh, okay.
So there's data about this and we should cycle back to it as a committee, but I
So-
don't want to make. a bunch
So
of-
but real quick here, so 2,591,000.
Yeah.
That's the amount of money. So let's say this year that there's been a person that every year just donates, that's $500,000 to tax lower.
Yeah.
They're rich, they want to give us $500,000 every year. And they say, we're stopping. So we lose
Right.
$500,000. What if that had happened the year we're in? So we're getting, that's right here, 2,591,000
What line are
revenue
you
share.
on?
I'm on the revenue share.
Okay,
2,591. If they took the $500,000 out and we continued
Yeah.
to spend like we got it,
Right,
we would have more spending.
Yeah.
So instead of 13,281,000, we'd be 13,781,000.
uh-huh,
Okay, so I'm gonna do that. And when you come across, so we lost $500,000,
in income.
but we grew revenue sharing.
Right.
By 300,000.
Right.
So the lost only cost us 200,000. So the argument can be made is we're
Yeah.
so dependent.
Right.
We don't even want people to donate to us.
Yeah.
Because they're losing, for every 5, they lose 3. Or for every 5, we get 3 back. So it's actually,
They
we
donated
lost
us-
$500,000 of a gift.
Yeah.
We went from 2,591 to 2,819, so we gained 200,000.
Yeah.
Roughly.
right, and
So when their 5 million they gave us was a loss, the gain we got back was 2. So there's actually a 3 million. So every year
Yeah.
they give us 5 million, they're really only giving us 3.
right, there's dependency issues, definitely, and I think that we,
You're calling that gift a tax, you're counting that in tax assessment, is that
he
why?
did, he
I
lowered
counted
the
it in
tax
spending,
assessment.
I increased our spending. I said, we're not gonna eat that.
Oh,
Somebody
I
gave us
see.
500,000, I'm gonna increase our
We're gonna
spending.
just build the Mugga airport that.
Yes,
Right.
and so that's why I kind of look at this, so you gotta remember, so when somebody wants, we find a whole bunch of
Yeah, yeah.
other revenue from another place. We
Yeah.
may lose revenue sharing because we're supplanting
Yeah.
our expenses.
Yeah.
So we need to put
We-
on
we will cycle
notice,
back.
no $1 million donations.
I wanted $1 million donation,
No, you want $1 million donation to your reserves because it doesn't affect your operating.
I see, there you go, donate to the reserves, that's the
Well, which
ticket.
is where people do donate,
Slide it
because they
in there.
typically put it toward
Yeah,
projects or
sure,
gifts or things that
sure.
don't affect.
Sure,
But-
anyway, we'll get to the next
Right.
level of discussion next time, but that was a great place to start, thank you.
No, it's kept her busy, so we're adjourning and it is 3:49, 4 minutes late. It was